When we hear the word Persia, palaces, carpets, poets, and star domes come to mind. But behind this beauty is something else. Persia preserved not only culture but also knowledge, which even the custodians were afraid of. Some texts have disappeared, others have been intentionally distorted, and something remained. In the sand, in the ruins, in the whisper of the wind among the black walls. In this issue, we will follow 10 Persian mysteries that neither history nor archaeology has explained. Because there are things that no one should have remembered. But the memory of a stone is long, and perhaps what we learn in the future will change our world forever. A city under salt. Deep in Dashti Kavir, the most lifeless place on the map of Iran, is hidden what should not be. The salt desert, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, seems dead. But in one of the areas, where the surface cracks under the weight of its own density, satellite images began to show an anomaly of irregular shape. Under the layers of salt is a network of angles, lines, arcs, as if someone designed a garden and drowned it in a mineral. Geophysicists consider it a layer of fossils, but when drilling to a depth of more than 10 meters, fragments of clay worked by human hands were extracted. One of the archaeologists working at the site described that when some layers were opened, the air began to change. Pressure was felt inside, and the devices recorded the jumps in humidity. There is no water or source of evaporation around. It's just the feeling that someone has opened a sealed capsule. Legends of local tribes avoid direct mention of this area, but one legend mentions a place where the dead do not rot. There, according to them, those who did not want to be buried remained, and those who entered this place never died. We just stopped. In 2007, a team of Iranian scientists conducted a test drilling. At a depth of 27 meters, a stone slab was found, perfectly rectangular, with an embossed pattern reminiscent of spiral paths. Some researchers have compared it to a microcircuit. When the plate was brought to the surface, the surrounding temperature dropped sharply. One of the technicians lost consciousness. Later, he did not remember the drilling or what had happened before it. Documents about this incident disappeared from the university archive. All that remains is a copy of the report sent to a private research center in Europe. It says that it was impossible to heat the stove. It remained cold even when placed in a thermal chamber. Some people are sure there is no garden under salt. Under it is a contour, a form cut according to a plan that was never built for life, and for storage. And if the salt covered it, then it is not erosion. This is isolation. No one approaches that area now. The devices do not work. The equipment gets stuck. Even birds avoid this place. It is on the maps, but in consciousness, they try to forget it. Because perhaps the past is not hidden under this crystalline shell, and that should not return. And a city under salt is not a mistake of nature. And the trace of a hand that knew that sometimes knowledge cannot be destroyed. The ego can only be frozen. Oracle from the underground city of Nushabad. Under the narrow streets of the Iranian city of Nushabad, an ancient system of passages and chambers carved into the rock is hidden. These dungeons were not created as a refuge from the enemy, but as a labyrinth in which even sound begins to fear its own reflection. Some call them simply salvation tunnels, but locals pass down a completely different version from generation to generation. There was a hall below that was listening, and sometimes he answered. It is not listed on the diagrams. It cannot be reached by the usual route. All mentions of him are scraps. Legends say, to get there, you need to go without a light, without a map, and without a question. At the moment when you are no longer sure why you went down, you turn around and the entrance is open. A narrow opening leading to a stone compartment without a door, without windows, no way out. There they say you can ask one question, but you can't say it out loud, otherwise the answer will not come, or the wrong one will come. In 1994, one of the archaeological groups consisting of 2 Iranian students and a German photographer descended 40 meters below. The communication device began to mute. The signal was distorted and returned as an echo, even when the microphone was turned off. They found a semicircular room, in the center of which lay a jug, completely smoked from the inside. Not a single candle or coal, only traces of soot on the walls, and strange imprinted symbols on the floor, which later no one could match with any known language. The photographer took several pictures, none of them showed up. But on one film, a subtle sound vibration remained, as if the camera recorded not light, but sound. When the speed increased, this noise turned into a weak female voice, speaking indistinctly, but in the same rhythm. like a mantra. The next day, the group left the city. One of the students disappeared. The second was later found in a state of amnesia, repeating one word in Farsi. Not mine, not mine, not mine. After this, the level below 30 meters in the dungeons of Nushabad is closed, formally for security reasons, informally, due to the fact that several workers refused to go down even for money. One said, "It's not a rock, it's an ear." Some researchers assume that the hall was built as a receiver of consciousness, where the question is formed not by speech, but by presence. A place where thought becomes form and form becomes an echo. And if you ask something sincere, but without words, you will get an answer, one and only once. After that, you will not be able to repeat the question because you will forget it, or you will cease to be the one who asked him. Today, the oracle is no longer sought, but every time someone gets lost in the deep chambers of Nushabad, the rescuers notice something strange. They go forward without a flashlight, silently, slowly, as if someone is calling or waiting, and maybe the question has already been asked. It remains only to wait when the stone decides to answer. Once, without words, no way back. The unburied dead from Tepe-Sialka. In the 1930s, archaeologists began excavations on the Tepe-Sialk Plateau, one of the oldest settlements on the territory of Persia. Remains of buildings, dishes, and decorations were found here. But the strangest find awaited deeper. At a level where, according to the geological layers, there should be no remains, the team came across a chamber with bodies that had not decomposed. These were adult men and women, in clothes, lying in the correct, if ritualistic order, head on the yoke, arms along the body. Their skin turned black, but did not rot. The eyeballs were empty, but the shape of the eyeballs was preserved, as if the decomposition stopped at one specific moment, and since then everything inside has remained untouched. Not a single fabric on them turned to dust. Not a single ornament has oxidized. Even wooden amulets remained intact, despite the humidity and pressure. But the main thing is the faces. All expressions were the same, not fear, not pain, and something reminiscent of surprise. Or, it's too late. Scientists could not explain the safety of phones. The chemical composition of the soil was not suitable for mummification. The temperature was unstable. Radioactive background is normal. Later, one of the laboratory assistants admitted that when he opened the chamber, he did not smell decomposition, but the smell of iron, as if someone had spilled mercury. Some bodies had tattoos, which disappeared in other representatives of that era. No one recognized the symbols. But later, one Orientalist compared them with the patterns at the entrances to temples dedicated to Ataru, the fiery spirit. Only here the symbols were distorted, as if someone tried to disrupt the order. In 1979, repeated excavations were prohibited, officially, on the lines of restoration expediency. Unofficially, after one of the researchers began to see in a dream the faces of the dead, lying no longer in the ground, but in his own apartment, he said that they were looking but not at him, and through him. Later, in a private publication, he wrote, "They weren't dead, they just didn't come back." Access to the lower layers of Tepe-Sialka is closed today, but from time to time, ground-penetrating radars pick up anomalous densities again. Densities that coincide with human bodies are in poses that should not be in these layers, as if they were placed there not thousands of years ago but recently, or at all, not yet placed, just already fixed. And if it is not burial, then it is not death. This is the expectation. Maybe they're not buried because they haven't finished watching yet, not because they are dead, and because something remained unfinished, or someone has not come down to them yet. The guard at the foot of the Behistun rock. Behistun is a sacred place where one of the oldest inscriptions in history was carved. The decree of Darius III, engraved on a sheer rock. This is an official certificate of power, victories, and order. But nearby, in the shadows of this monumental message, there is something that is not told about on excursions. On the lower level of the rock massif, a little away from the royal carving, there is a figure, not indicated, not signed, not catalogued. It resembles a person, but only partially. Hands are too long. The head is elongated. The proportions do not correspond to the anatomy of any known culture. There is no facial expression, only deep recesses instead of eyes. Official reports call it unformed rock deformation. But at the same time, her height is exact, 2 meters and 23 centimeters. The location is exactly opposite the sunrise on the day of the vernal equinox. Coincidence? Then why is there no shadow at the foot of the figure at the peak of the light? In 1935, a German archaeologist noted her in his personal notes as Unbekannter Beobachter, unknown observer. He wrote that it is difficult to stand next to the figure. Internal pressure appears at the level of the stomach. It is as if you are not looking at her, but she is pressing with her gaze inward. Since then, the object has been overlooked. But in 2008, a young researcher from Tabriz decided to study the structure in more detail. She used a laser scanner and got a three-dimensional model. When compared with images of guardians of other civilizations, it became clear the shape of the figure repeats the structure of the Sumerian statuette found in Ur, but in a mirror position, like a reflection, or the opposite. Later, she noticed that the object had no natural wear and tear. Although the rest of the rock is eroded, the figure remains perfectly smooth, as if it was carved out later, or protected, but not covered with anything. At night, according to several workers, the figure shimmers, does not glow, and as if pulsating very slowly. One of them refused to come to the excavation after that. He said, "He saw me, I shouldn't have looked." Some people believe that the figure is not dedication, but fixation, that it was not carved in honor of someone, but as a marker of presence. Perhaps this is not a person, and not even a deity, and what was observed when the text of Darius was written, or earlier, or always. And if the rock speaks with the voice of the empire, then the figure next to it speaks in silence. And in this silence is not emptiness and attention. Because not everything carved in stone wants to be read. Sometimes it just waits for you to come closer, to see not the form and the eyes that are already looking from that side. A mirror from a vein of the earth. In 1972, in the mountain area near Zenjan, a group of speleologists discovered a crevice, inside which something resembling a massive plate of black stone shone. It was not inserted into the rock. It was a part of the rock, as if the mountain itself sprouted from this smooth body. The surface was polished to a mirror shine, but not a single face was reflected in it. Only silhouettes, and only those that were behind the observer. An attempt to photograph the plate was unsuccessful. The camera either did not fix the light or produced a frame in which the entire space behind the observer seemed burned out, without shadows, without details. One of the films recorded only a weak pulsation, as if the light was coming from inside the stone and not reflecting the outside. When trying to touch the surface, there was an effect similar to touching the skin, with recoil, as if the surface is breathing, but not openly and inside. One of the speleologists, touching the mirror, felt that his own shadow on the wall stopped while he was moving. The video showed that his shadow was not synchronized with the body for 3 seconds. When an attempt was made to partially excavate the plate, the instrument failed. The drill cracked, the metal crumbled. Geochemists later said that the substance had not been identified. It did not conduct electricity, but it was not a dielectric either. It did not absorb moisture, but it did repel it without a hydrophobic layer. Local residents said that the stone belongs to the one who looks behind. One of the old women claimed, "This is not a mirror, this is a look into which a form was accidentally inserted." Later in the report, an assumption appeared. The plate may not be an object, but a membrane that does not reflect reality but filters it. Some of the researchers called it an instrument of extended memory. Allegedly, it shows not what is, but what the observer could remember if his memory was not limited by the body. It was not possible to cut the sample, but the legend remained. One man, who looked at her for too long, never spoke again. He sat at the entrance to the crevasse, always with his back to the mirror, and whispered, "I'm not there. He's there. I stayed." Now the place on the map is hidden under the industrial zone. But satellite images in the infrared range record the absence of temperature in the crack, not reflection. As if the mirror does not participate in thermodynamics. It's like it's here, but from the second layer. And every time someone stands in front of it, it waits for someone to stay, forever in a reflection that does not exist. The tower that disappears at dawn. The tower, which cannot be found but can be seen from generation to generation. She appears only at night, high, made of light stone, without windows, without decorations. Only a smooth surface, as if not built, but displaced from the lunar world. There are no official ones mentioned, neither on the map nor in the reports. But in 1986, an expedition of 3 students from the University of Tehran, looking for old Zoroastrian pilgrimage routes, sent in the following report. A structure in the desert, not marked on maps, about 18 meters high, material unknown, surface absorbing light, disappeared after sunrise. They took pictures, but only sand and emptiness appeared. One has a faint spot, like a camera error. On the second, there is a long shadow cast by an object that is not in the frame. Those who claim to be closer said, at a certain distance, a sound similar to a heartbeat appears. The stones underfoot become warmer, and it seems that the tower does not stand still, but breathes slowly. One of the witnesses described that it does not have an entrance, but the feeling is that you are already inside. In 1991, nomads reported that 3 teenagers entered the tower at night and did not return. They were not found. But 3 days later, a strange mark appeared in the sand in the same place. A circle, scorched as if by heat. Nothing inside, no traces, no ashes, only silence in which people began to have convulsions. Scientists who tried to build a map of the tower that appeared noticed that all the coordinates fit into a geometrically correct pattern, as if it were moving along a closed trajectory. But one of the researchers later admitted, every time we tried to draw her path on paper, the lines disappeared. They were just words in ink. We remembered that she was there, but we did not see her. There are assumptions that the tower is not an object, but an informational anomaly that manifests itself in space at moments when the border of perception weakens. It is not built. She remembers reality itself, like a download error, like a detail that someone was supposed to erase but didn't have time. And if the tower appears only at night, perhaps it does not disappear at dawn, and it just becomes too real to see. And then everyone who entered it did not disappear. He simply remained inside what was not supposed to be seen, not because it is hostile, and because it is a mirror for those who have forgotten what a shadow is. Book of Jade. In one of the closed rooms of the old Zoroastrian temple near Kerman, during the clearing of the collapsed archive, the workers discovered an object that did not resemble any known ritual artifact. It was a massive block of green translucent stone, similar to jade, polished to a shine. It was not just heavy, impossibly heavy. 3 men could barely move it, despite its modest size. There were no symbols on the surface, tolko uglublinia, reminiscent of the terms, but under the light of a certain frequency, narrow ultraviolet spectrum, words that change when the angle of vision is changed began to appear. In one position, there are terms in the Pahlavi script. In the second, images similar to wave graphs. In the third, there are symbols that are not comparable to any writing system. Scientists who studied the object said, the text is not fixed. He reacts to the person reading it. One of the researchers saw only one sentence on the first page. Now you already knew. The second is a description of dreams that he never told anyone. The third is nothing but emptiness. The stone refused to open to everyone equally. Later, it turned out that the surface of the block has abnormal thermal conductivity. It always remains cold to the touch, even when placed in a heated room. An attempt to scan it with an X-ray gave an image of the second structure inside, like a book inside a book, but the angle of refraction did not allow them to penetrate inside. The legend of the Zoroastrian priests reads, "The true text is not written, it is remembered." Perhaps this book is not a text in the usual sense, but a reflection of thoughts recorded not by ink, but by resonance. Like a trace in the glass, formed not by hand, but by intention. One of the researchers, shortly after working with the artifact, disappeared without a trace. His laptop remained on. There is an empty document on the screen. But when the contrast was changed, the words appeared. I saw what would happen, if I chose. Now the artifact is not exhibited. It is stored in a private collection, access to which is prohibited. But there are rumors that the stone began to change. Cracks appeared inside, which are not reflected on the surface. Some believe that he writes himself, not with words, but with tension. As if the stone itself was waiting for someone who would finally read it not with eyes, but with intention. Because perhaps this book is not for reading, and for awareness. She doesn't talk about the future. It reflects the consequences of the present, and if you read it, you are already in this chain, even if you haven't chosen yet. The stone already knows, and he is waiting for you to find out too. A staircase in the rock leading to nowhere. In a mountain massif not far from Kazvin, among cracks in a sheer rock, tourists accidentally came across perfectly carved steps. At first glance, they seemed to be part of an ancient temple or a caravan route, but after a few meters, the ladder went inside the rock at an unnatural angle, as if deep not into the mountains, but into the very structure of space. Archaeologists were called. First, enthusiasm. The stone is polished, there are no traces of tools. The width of the steps perfectly repeats the proportions of a human walk. But there are no railings, no recesses, no relief by which it would be possible to understand why it was built. None of the people who inhabited this territory left any mention of such forms. At a depth of about 90 meters, the ladder breaks off, not in the cavity, not in the hall, and in a smooth, perfectly vertical wall, without cracks, without seams, without reverberation. If he speaks, the sound does not return. One of the female students who accompanied the expedition described, "There is even one's own silence, someone else's." An attempt to scan the rock from the outside revealed no anomaly, but scanning from the inside showed that behind the wall there is another 17 meters of emptiness. Only the shape of this cavity does not correspond to the geometry of the rock. It is as if it is internally curved, as one engineer described it. Something in geometry doesn't obey logic. Later, a group of seismologists joined the study. They discovered that near the stairs, seismic waves are distorted, as if resonating with something on the other side. But the stone does not pass the storm. No drill leaves a trace, as if matter is not a stone, but a frozen space. Local residents avoid this place. One shepherd said, "Those who go down do not always return to those who went down." When asked if he saw it himself, he replied, "I don't know if they came back. They were talking, but it wasn't their voice." There are rumors that the staircase is not a structure but an indication of the point where the transition took place, the transition of what is unclear, between worlds, in time, perception. There is a version that this is an archive built not for storing objects, but for storing actions. Degrees are like fixation of intention, and everyone who descends adds a step. But if you descend without intention, you will not reach it. You just disappear, not in space, and in his route. The ladder will remain. There will be no traces, because you became a part of what she leads inside, but it does not return. Persia is not just an ancient land. This is a memory that has not forgotten itself. The stones are not just lying here, they are watching. The towers are not only collapsed, they are listening. We went through 10 traces that do not fit into textbooks, but do not disappear from space. Something was hidden, something was forgotten on purpose, but not everything goes away. Because there are secrets that continue to breathe in the stones, in the shadows, in the reflection. They do not require faith, only silence. And if you listened carefully, perhaps you are already part of them, even if you still don't know what exactly you started to remember.